The last year of high school before college is typically stressful enough on its own, but our lives took the chaotic turn when my dad lost his job and we had to uproot ourselves to a new town in search of fresh opportunities. The situation was far from ideal, and what made it even worse was that Dad had been a teacher at my school, so everyone was well aware of his actions. It marked one of the darkest chapters in our lives since the passing of my mom when I was just 12. This time, the blame fell squarely on Dad's shoulders. You see, he had been involved in an affair with the principal's wife, and to make matters worse, someone in my class had recorded their indiscretions and shared it on social media. While I could have chosen to remain at the school and complete my exams, the harsh reality was that I would never have lived it down. It took me 3 agonizing days to muster the courage to approach the principal and inform him of my departure. He barely acknowledged me, simply uttering, "You should be ashamed of your father. Leave my school." As I emptied out my locker, a fellow student approached me, casting a shadow of shame upon both me and my dad. He asserted that we were disgraceful and implied that I should never show my face in town again. I wasted no time in escaping that environment, leaving behind the remnants of our old life. Initially, life in our new town was marked by misery. The viral video continued to haunt us, and I even contemplated asking Dad if I could change my last name back to Mom's just to sever any lingering association with the scandal. Dad's job prospects were dismal. His notoriety from the video followed him everywhere, with some newspapers even covering the story. It felt like an unending nightmare. I realized that I had to start anew, enrolling in a different school to complete my final exams. To maintain anonymity, I decided to undergo a transformation. I chopped off my long hair into a pixie cut and bleached it blonde. I even got my nose pierced. On the first day of my new school, Dad offered to drive me, but I politely declined, choosing to walk instead to avoid any potential recognition or unwelcome attention. I knew I was being harsh on him, but I couldn't bring myself to care. After all, he had already tarnished my reputation, and I wasn't about to let him do it again. While on my way to school, lost in my thoughts, I accidentally bumped into a young man. "Hey, watch out," he exclaimed. "I'm blind." I quickly apologized and turned to face him, genuinely surprised by his revelation. An idea struck me in that moment. I reached into my bag and donned a pair of sunglasses. As I approached the school building, I carefully traced my path along the wall, feigning blindness. I could sense the curious glances of passersby, but I paid them no heed. Some began to whisper, and doubts crept into my mind. What had I gotten myself into? However, a kind-hearted girl named Ruby approached me. She introduced herself and offered her assistance in navigating the school. Ruby explained that her brother was also visually impaired, so she understood the challenges I might face. It was too late to backtrack now. I had committed to this act. How hard could it be? I thought to myself. I informed her that I was new and that it was my first day. Ruby's enthusiasm was palpable as she eagerly guided me through the school's layout. She even described the locations of facilities like the girls' bathroom. She then accompanied me to the registration desk, where I secretly anticipated that the principal would uncover my deceit. To my surprise, this school seemed to take disability seriously, and the staff were genuinely supportive. It was a stark departure from my previous experiences, and for once, it felt like people genuinely cared about my well-being. Ruby became my designated guide, and that first morning at the school passed by swiftly. During lunch, when she introduced me to her boyfriend, I had to suppress my amusement. He was quite attractive. However, the best part was realizing that I could unabashedly gaze at him, confident that he assumed I couldn't see. When Ruby's back was turned, I noticed him sneak glances in my direction, appraising my appearance with an open mouth. It was evident that he found me appealing. It felt as though an entirely new world had just opened up before me. Once people discovered that I was pretending to be blind, they began doing all sorts of strange things in my presence. One guy unabashedly picked his nose, and when Ruby accompanied me to the restroom, she didn't even bother to close the door. It was rather embarrassing, but I felt powerless to intervene. I feared that someone would eventually catch on. As expected, things took a downturn in the afternoon. Ruby dropped me off at the special needs classroom and promptly departed. I surveyed my surroundings and noticed that the individuals in the room had genuine disabilities and learning challenges. The urge to confess my deception and flee surged within me. However, before I could act on it, the teacher approached me and offered a comforting embrace. That moment served as a reminder of why I was enduring this charade, to escape the stigma of being the girl whose dad had an affair. Then she placed a book in front of me, and I realized it was written in Braille. Panic coursed through me. How on earth would I decipher the contents of this book? I had no knowledge of Braille, and I couldn't escape fast enough. So I feigned feeling unwell and made a hasty retreat from the classroom. My attempt at leaving inadvertently led to an accident that exacerbated the situation. In my rush to escape, I grabbed a nearby chair and pulled it with more force than I intended, inadvertently sending someone tumbling to the floor. The girl had been seated in the chair I had disturbed, and she landed with a painful thud, fracturing her arm in the process. It was a sobering moment as I realized that this girl was genuinely blind, making me feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. Surprisingly, nobody seemed upset with me, as they all believed I couldn't see. The teacher promptly called for an ambulance to tend to the injured girl and offered to contact my parents to arrange for me to be picked up. In a state of panic, I fabricated a story claiming that my father was unwell and my mother had passed away several years ago. The teacher expressed deep sympathy for my predicament and allowed me to rest in her office until the end of the day, offering to drive me home afterward. As I sat in the teacher's office, I contemplated slipping away without her notice. I left a note to express my gratitude for the teacher's care. Carefully, I composed it with my left hand to ensure it appeared authentic. Sneaking out was the next step in my plan. As everyone was engrossed in their classes, I strolled out casually, just as I would on any ordinary day, and made my way home. Upon arriving home, I found my dad in a surprisingly good mood. He had a job interview lined up and a date scheduled for the evening. I chose to ignore him and retreated to my room, reflecting on the craziness of my first day. The following day, Ruby awaited me at the school gate. I pretended not to notice her, attempting to walk past, but she seized my hand and guided me back to class. My teacher had some exciting news to share, emphasizing that, as an 18-year-old with a visual impairment and a supposedly sick father, I was eligible to apply for certain benefits. I was astounded by this revelation. Perhaps pretending to be blind had unexpected perks. However, my day took an unexpected turn during gym class, which I hadn't anticipated. To my chagrin, it was swimming class. The gym teacher provided me with a swimsuit, and I intentionally put it on backward, thinking it would enhance the illusion of my blindness. Yet, our special education teacher, who had been friendly thus far, rolled her eyes at me, remarking that I should know how to dress myself by now. Her behavior puzzled me, but I couldn't quite grasp why. The rest of the day passed in a blur as I continued my challenging act of feigning blindness. After school, I decided to visit the mall, concealing my identity with sunglasses in case any school acquaintances recognized me. The mall proved rather uneventful, so I purchased a milkshake and contemplated leaving. Suddenly, I spotted Ruby and her boyfriend, which sent me into a panic. My heart raced as I played with my phone, dreading the inevitable moment when they would identify me. However, as they kissed, I realized something was amiss. It wasn't Ruby that he was kissing. Directly locking eyes with him, he froze, his mouth poised to utter a response. Then, I overheard him mutter under his breath, "Never mind, she's blind. Phew, except I wasn't blind, mister, and you had just been caught red-handed." Swiftly, I retraced my steps, concealed myself behind the fountain, and discreetly snapped a picture of their kiss. Ruby deserved better. I found her on Instagram and sent her a private message with the incriminating photo. Her immediate reply was filled with suspicion. "Who is this? Why are you trying to ruin my relationship?" It suddenly dawned on me that my Instagram handle was unrelated to my real name, and my profile picture bore no resemblance to me. Moreover, I had been pretending to be blind, which only added to her confusion. Clearly, she had no idea it was me. Over the next few days, Ruby was conspicuously absent from school, and I couldn't help but regret sending her that photo. If she ever discovered it was me, I might lose my only friend. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, kept giving me hostile looks, but I continued to keep my head down. She must have informed him that someone had witnessed their encounter that day. Was he onto me? It certainly seemed that way because, on a fateful Friday afternoon, I saw him rifling through my locker and taking my phone. I wanted desperately to intervene, but it was too late. He had already taken it. I hurried home, racking my brain for what to do next. If he looked through my phone and found all those photos, he'd undoubtedly realize I'd been faking my blindness. Reporting my phone as missing was an option, but I had no concrete proof that he was the culprit, nor could I explain how I'd seen him in my locker. All I wanted was to return home and figure out my next steps. Unfortunately, that's not how the day unfolded. My dad had invited his date over, and the moment I entered the house, he instructed me to get dressed and join him in the kitchen. Just what I needed. I was in the midst of chopping carrots when she arrived, and I turned around as my father introduced her. "Luna, sweetie, come meet my new friend, Hazel." I was so startled that I missed my footing and dropped the knife I was holding. I stared at Hazel in shock. She reacted with concern. "Oh no, Luna, are you okay? You shouldn't handle sharp knives like that. Come on, John, you know better than that." Wait a minute, the two of them knew each other. "My dad," he replied. "Yes, of course we do. I'm Luna's teacher." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't expected my dad's date to be my teacher. She continued, "Why didn't you tell me that your daughter is blind? I had no idea that you were her father." In fact, she told me that her father was sick. I stood there, my face burning with shame. I had to escape. It was my worst nightmare. "Luna," my father screamed, and that's when I was caught. My pretense of being blind had been driven by a desire for people to like me and not associate me with my dad's mistakes. Now I had messed everything up, including my dad's new relationship. Hazel, my teacher, was so disappointed in me. She declared that I was a huge letdown and that she didn't want to be with a man who raised a daughter like me. It felt like I was just as bad as my father, like daughter. I wish I could say that life returned to normal after that, and that I went back to school on Monday to start over. But life doesn't work that way. I got expelled as expected. Then, that Monday after school, there was a knock at the door. It was Ruby. I held my breath, anticipating that she might unleash her anger on me. However, she just handed me my phone. She admitted she was upset when she found out I had lied about being blind, especially since her brother was blind, and it wasn't okay to joke about such things. But then she said I had saved her from dating a cheater, and she was genuinely grateful. I was shocked by her reaction. She informed me that she had broken up with her boyfriend, who had been suspended for theft. "Do you still want to be my friend?" I cautiously asked her. To my amazement, she did. I couldn't believe it. Of course, I could have saved myself a lot of trouble if I hadn't pretended to be blind in the first place. But then, would I have discovered that Ruby's ex was a bad influence? Would Ruby have even considered being friends with me? There were just two significant challenges I needed to address. Firstly, I had to complete my school education, and secondly, I had to find a way to help my father, who was deeply affected by Hazel's breakup. Summoning up the courage, I decided to call Hazel and ask if she would meet me to have a conversation. Surprisingly, she agreed. When we met, I confessed that I had made a series of mistakes, largely influenced by what had occurred at my previous school. I explained that my father had made some regrettable choices in the past, as had I, but that he genuinely cared for her and deserved a second chance. I told Hazel I was willing to do anything to make amends and implored her to consider advocating for my return to school. To my astonishment, not only did they permit me to return and complete my senior year, but they also hired my dad. Hazel and my father are now a couple, and Ruby has become my closest friend. We even attend the same college together. As part of the agreement when I graduated, I volunteered to assist children with learning disabilities. It felt like the least I could do given my past actions. I have learned from my mistakes and have genuinely committed to living a more honest life. Interestingly, people do tend to forget things over time. My dad's affair at my previous school has become old news, and so has my chariot of pretending to be blind. Here's to a more truthful future.